Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks. Welcome. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and I am here with my co-host, Rabbi Shlomo Gemara. How are you today, Rabbi?
Baruch Hashem. I had a wonderful week, still thinking every moment about our Chayalim and people in Gaza. Hopefully this week will bring better news. Amen. But other than that, Baruch Hashem, the school is over. We are dealing now with administrative things, which is different. So I'm ready for the podcast.
Good for you. Me too. Now, let me just explain to our viewers what this podcast is all about. The Rabbi and I started a new series, which we are effectively calling PARSHA Prose. And essentially what we're doing is we are teaching and learning and teaching the Parsha HaShavua. The Parsha HaShavua is basically the portion of the Torah that week. This week, the portion is called Chukat. And then what we're doing is we are comparing it, we're juxtaposing it with classic literature. And the literature that we are comparing it to this week is the Death of Ivan Illych. Now, it's going to be a very interesting comparison. On the maudlin side, we will be speaking a lot about death, but death in a productive way. Just a little context here. Parshat Chukat is in the book of Bamidbar, or Numbers. It's the sixth portion out of 10, and it has 87 verses. In other words, if you were to count every line, you would see that there are 87 of them. You'll find it 19:1 to 22:1, and the Haftorah, which is the piece that we read after the Torah, is Judges 11:1 to 33. It's an action-packed parsha. It discusses the Red Heifer, or the paraduma, and that's really what we're going to dive into in a minute. It discusses the death of Miriam and Aaron, Moses' siblings. Moses hits the rock in this parsha when God says to him, speak to it, but instead, for many different reasons, Chazal say, he hit the rock. Edom's refusal to allow the Bnei Israel to walk through their turf, and God sends down fiery serpents at some point as a punishment for complaining about the manna. So it is action-packed. Rabbi, today, as I said, we are talking about Parshat Chukat, and we are talking about the death of Ivan Illich. Could you give us a sense, at the core of both of these texts, what are we speaking about, and in what way are they sisters?
First of all, I was not sure that I want to talk about this book for the very reason that this book was written. I will explain what I mean. Our Parsha, as you presented well, talking about this. We have the story of paraduma. Maybe you will elaborate, but this is a process of purifying a person who came in touch with a dead body or was sometime with a dead body. And he needs purification that is going through a very odd process of burning a red heifer, red cow, using the ashes of the red cow with cedar and hyssop, and sprinkling water, and only then the person who was in touch with the dead person can come back to regular life, to come to the temple and to bring his korbanot. Until then, he's barred from entering the temple.
He or she?
He or she, yeah. And the Torah in general is talking about like Lashon Zachar and a male form. But it's interesting that the next parsha, or the adjacent parsha, is talking about Miriam. And we all know her great leadership of the women of Bnei Israel. So regarding your gender comment, yes. So the Parsha is talking about males, but obviously it's males or females.
Okay.
Now, many times we focus on the deceased person. But what does it mean to the relatives, to the family around? There is dynamic to death. And in my opinion, the Death of Ivan Illych is the best piece of literature that was written about this concept. About, today we have blogs, we have people recording themselves, they post it on Facebook, even the worst times of their life. Tolstoy managed to portray what happened to a person who is dying in a magnificent way. His thoughts, how does it influence the family? And I can take many things that Tolstoy wrote in Ivan Illich and to understand better what the Torah is doing with the story of Paraduma, with the story of the death of Miriam and Aaron, and preparing us to the death of the greatest of all, Moshe Rabbeinu. And I think, again, and we go back to the point that we mentioned before, literature sometimes gives us a real piece of life that helps us to understand what the Torah meant. And we will talk about some issues like this today. So it is depressing. And if I can allow one sentence about Russian literature, or maybe Russian culture, it's a lot about this. A very dark, black kind of culture. I don't know about today, but the old Russian Dostoevsky, Gogol, Tolstoy, they are dealing extensively with the concept of death. The raven, the black raven, Chornia. It's a very common theme in Russian literature. But this is like such a psychological, psychiatric insight into the process of death that I thought it can teach us something about what the Torah meant by purifying yourself from death.
Rabbi, maybe you can just give a little bit more of a context when it comes to Russian literature. I noticed this was my first go around with Tolstoy, and I want to thank you very much for that, for bringing me to this place, because I was always a little bit skittish about reading classic literature, thinking that I wouldn't get it. And all you ever hear about Russian literature from neophytes is that is so thick with text.
Dense.
And one has to remember the names to the extent people tell me they write them down on a piece of paper. Is the thickness of the text, the adjectival use of the language, is that a reflection of the culture of Russia at that time?
Absolutely. No questions about it. Listen, Russian people are slightly different than the Western ones. I think, more reflective. Again, I'm not talking about 2024. But I think it's ingrained in the Russian culture, looking about life. What does it mean to live your life? And everything that depends on it. And I was attracted to Tolstoy, especially to Tolstoy, after I read Anna Karenina. Whoa, this gave me so many insights. And I said, I must read Tolstoy. And then, of course, Peace and War and War and Peace. And I started to explore the Russian literature, and I found it very different from the stuff I used to read until this moment. It's this, you have pictures which are abstract, and you have to figure out what exactly does it mean. Yeah. The Russian literature is exactly the opposite. It takes a very thin brush and give you every little detail in clarity that is greater than the resolution of a picture, actually, because you see also inside it. And it's hard to read. The Death of Ivan Illych, actually, I would consider it as a very good introduction, because it's not a long book, but it gives you everything that you need to know about Russian literature. That's why I choose it.
I think it's called a novella. It's about 54 pages.
Right.
Just curious, because we want to get to know you more so, Rabbi. When you read Russian literature, do you read it in Russian or do you read it in English?
Okay, here's a story. It's a very interesting story. I read Anna Karenina both in English and Hebrew. Maybe one day I will talk about like translations to Hebrew, because you take a language and you translate it to a language which is so rich and so many layers. Because Hebrew, you have Tanakh and you have the Talmud and you have the Mishnah and you have like many layers of language. And to translate, you have to decide what layer am I going to use here. Like it's more like the biblical one, it's a Mishnaic one, it's a Talmudic one. And let me tell you, some of the translator, especially from Russian, because remember, like Jews were always like in the core of culture in St. Petersburg and Moscow. They did suffer a lot, but they also were part and appreciated by the intelligentsia of the Russian people. And when they took, for example, I'll give you one example, the Death of Ivan Illych was translated by a person by name Ziskind. He was himself like an author. And you know what, when you read it, it's so funny. When you read it, you feel like you read like a piece that was written by a person with space, like many biblical verses, many Talmudic expression that fits Tolstoy. I'm sure that if Tolstoy would read it in Hebrew, he wouldn't recognize it. So after I read Anna Karenina, I said, I must read this in the source. I want to see like the real thing. And because another issue that happened in my yeshiva, I had kind of a bet with one of my students who insisted that he cannot learn Hebrew, So I say to him, listen, I have an idea. Maybe you're right. Maybe some people cannot learn another language. Maybe I'm not aware of the experience of learning a new language, especially like very different letters, because the Hebrew letters are very different from the English. You know what? I'm not going to complain against you before I take upon myself the experience of learning a language that I don't know the alphabet, because Hebrew and English are not the same. And we will compete against each other. And since I really always had this dream to learn a little bit Russian, I took the Russian language.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, at the time, I didn't know what I put myself into, because the Russian language is most likely one of the hardest languages in the world. I'm not saying it. In the foreign ministry of the US, when they prepare their ambassadors, they have like a chart between 1 to 5, and Russian in the 5, like the hardest category of languages. So yeah, I taught myself some Russian. As I told you, very quickly I realized that between me and reading Tolstoy, there is like unbridgeable gap. But I managed to read it, and you know what? Until this very day, sometimes, especially when I go to the store, there are these Russian newspapers. I don't know if you ever saw them, but you can find it. So busy, no frills. I like to take it, and I actually able to read the titles and some of the news. So yes, it was because of Tolstoy that I was exposed to a new language. A new language means also, new culture. Language is culture.
And I noticed too, when we leave shul on Friday night, that very often when you're walking by the seniors' home next door, you'll stop and you'll speak Russian to the old ladies.
Absolutely. I'm not sure that they understand what I say, but they're very nice to me. They like response in Russian, and sometimes they understand what they say.
Rabbi, are you familiar with Hillel Hulkin?
Yes, of course.
So I've interviewed him on this show, and in fact,
really?
You'll be happy.
That's a great honor for me to be interviewed on the same show.
Well, thank you for saying that. He's a special man. You'll be happy to know that last night I emailed him and I asked him if he would be on a panel with you critiquing writings by Agnon, because he has translated Agnon.
Of course. Listen to this. If you put me and him on the same show, I go first for the mikveh, like, to be spiritually fit to a panel like this.
We'll give you time.
You have to understand, he's a great person.
He's a great person. He's a translator, world-renowned, and he's an author. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is called Parsha and Prose. It's a brand new series that the rabbi and I have dove into. We're really excited about it. And let's get going here. The Parsha this week is Parshat Chukat. Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe v'el Aaron lemor. God comes to Moshe and to Aaron. That's important. Both the brothers, not just Moshe. Sometimes you'll see just one of them. And he says to him, this is the decree of the Torah, which Hashem has commanded, saying, speak to the children of Israel, and they shall take you a completely red cow, which is without blemish, and upon which a yoke has not come. And this will be used, as we will see shortly, in terms of getting back the spirituality, if you will, of an individual who has become impure because they have come in contact with a corpse. Now, Rabbi, at its very essence, what's going on here with this red cow?
So there is a whole ceremony of preparing the red cow, but it continues over the many generations. Actually, they used the ashes of this red cow and some red cows that were burned afterwards. According to our sages, there were 8 red cows, including the one that was done in the time of Moses. And actually, we have to take the red cow remnants of Moses and to mix them into every new cycle of red cow. And actually, we have a historic documenting process of who were the Kohanim Gedolim that in their days, actually, they did the red cow. As I said, the important thing is that the person who came in touch with a dead body have to go through purification, which the most important of them is a sprinkling on the 3rd day and the 7th day of the time that he is defiled, that he came in touch with a dead person. This water, after the process and after bringing sacrifice, he is going to be ready to go back to his spiritual life again, to enter the temple, and to be again a complete part of society.
Is there anything about this that is physical, or is it totally spiritual?
Well, the process is obviously physical, but it's completely spiritual. Like the ability to enter the temple depends on this process. So it's obviously more about spiritual one. And, there is something very strange about the whole process. The person who is the subject of the whole process that you sprinkle the water on was not allowed to go into the temple. And now, after this process, he is allowed. But what is interesting? If you read the Torah, you find out that all the peoples involved in burning the cow, in preparing the ashes, sprinkling the water, they themselves become defiled through the process. A major paradox that, according to our sages, even Solomon, the wisest of all, he said the following words: "Echkema vehi rechoka mimeni." I'm very smart, but this particular parsha of Para Aduma is beyond my reach. I cannot understand it.
It's very interesting because it really speaks to the idea that bad can come from good. And I've seen Chazal give some examples of that, where Abraham comes from Terach, right?
That's a great example.
Interesting. A mother who is breastfeeding her child, essentially that milk transforms from the blood of the woman, right? We're not supposed to drink blood.
Absolutely.
So there are examples of bad that come out of good, right?
And there are many examples like this. I think we spoke about last week about Samuel, the prophet who comes from the descendants of Korah. And if you think about it, many parts of Jewish history, think about King David. King David himself came from the nation of the Moabites, right? Yes. Ruth came. So you take a nation that we are actually supposed to hate because they mistreated us when we came from Egypt to Eretz Israel, and our ultimate redeemer, the Mashiach, is going to come from this nation.
So let's give a little bit of a context again to our prose today. Parsha, we're understanding or at a very surfacey level so far. Once again, the book is called The Death of Ivan Illich. It's by Leo Tolstoy. It's a novella that explores the life and death of Ivan Illich, a high court judge in 19th century Russia. The story begins with the announcement of Ivan's death, and then delves into the retrospective narrative of his life. Ivan Illich is portrayed as a man who, despite achieving success in his career and social life, feels a deep sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction. Rabbi, can the ritual of the Red Heifer be seen as a metaphor for the existential purification that Ivan Illich undergoes at the end of his life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Coming in touch with the concept of death, especially in the family, I see it as a paralyzing experience. You start to ask yourself questions. You see suffering of other people many times. And you cannot actually continue your life. I can tell you from my own experience, this last year, I lost my father-in-law and my mother-in-law in 1 year.
Yes, I'm sorry.
People who were very active in the community, gave so much to the community, both of them Holocaust survivors, wonderful people. And I have to tell you, something broke within myself after their death. Like, it was the first time that I realized, what? Even people like them can die? This was, for me, a paralyzing experience. And for the entire family, like you are not the same person, and it can shatter you. And there are all kinds of deaths. Sometimes, Baruch Hashem, my father-in-law passed away like short of his 100th birthday. My mother-in-law, 95 years old. Baruch Hashem, they were zoche for a long life. But sometimes it's a very different experience. As we all experienced in the last year, like young people who were killed in the prime time of their life. So the touching death or being around death will paralyze you. That, according to the Torah, is the essence of defiling. What is defiling? What is the meaning of tuma, of being tameh? Is being removed from life, from the stream of life. The Torah wants us to live, and to live well with great values and accomplishment. And the situation of any tum'ah is moving away from the stream of life. And there is nothing more than approaching death than take you away from the stream of life, especially if you are the person, but also to the family. And in Ivan Illich, we start looking upon life, upon death, as a way of purification. Like, you reflect on your life, you see the blemishes of your life, and sometimes your entire life was one big blemish, and you get the gift of purifying yourself before death. Now, this is a very Christian idea about Ivan Illich, because Tolstoy was Christian and devoted Christian. And the 3 days at the end when he dies, I think is kind of parallel to, another person that died and in 3 days came back to life and so on. And we also have the idea that tshuva can happen on the last breath of a person. The David HaMelech in Tehillim says, "Tashev enosha daka vatomer shuvu bnei adam," which is the same idea. Like, God sometimes will break you, and He's waiting for a tshuva in the last second of your life. This clarity that my life was mistake, but I now realized in my last moment of life what is the truth about life, which is being in the shadow and under the supervision and closeness, actually, of God Himself. So in this, I would say the need to purify from such an experience of death is the foundation of Ivan Illich and Parshat Chukat. And of course, again, they come from different worlds, but the human need to face death and to raise above it is the foundation of Ivan Illich and Parshat Chukat.
Do you face death yourself, of your own death? Admei Vestrim till 120?
You know what? I think the whole book is about this one. And we have to be very honest about it. You know what? Maybe I can quote one thing that actually to me was the best quote from Ivan Illich. So Ivan Illich is doing like a logical experiment. And he said the following: Caius is a man. That's, first lesson of logic, you learn this one. Caius is a man. Men are mortal. Therefore, Caius is mortal. That's logic. But it had always seemed to him correct that applied to Caius, but not that applied to himself. Ivan Illich is not Caius, an abstract man, but a man of flesh and blood, of hopes and desires. Caius really was mortal, and it was right for him to die. But for me, little Vanya, Ivan Illich, with all my thoughts and emotions, it's altogether a different matter. It cannot be that I ought to die. That would be too terrible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So listen, every person on earth will tell you, yes, we know that we are going to die. Do you live under the impression that today might be your last day, tomorrow, a year from now? This would be so different. So I think the main point of the story is to make sure that you remember that. It's not only a logic, yes, every person dies, therefore if I'm a person, I will die. It's to make it part of your existential experience. Death is waiting for you. You have to know what to do with it. Now, this is very interesting because indeed, Tolstoy make it like an experiment of logic. And when you think about it, one thing we said about Para Aduma is that it defies logic. Because I think the Torah itself knew that in our logic we do understand what death means, and we speak about it and we know about it. But the Torah said, you know what? It's beyond logic. It's something that has to be part of your life. If you are going to use only your logic, you will find many ways to ignore and to deny the fact that one day you are going to die. That's where I see the beauty of like Ivan Illich bring this logical equation, and the Torah said, what I want you to know about death, that you have to take it from the realm of logic and to bring it to your heart and to your mind and to live in peace with the fact that one day you are going to die.
Mm-hmm. Let's continue to add context here. You alluded to the idea that the red heifer, let's call it the mitzvah, or the chiyuv, the obligation of using the red heifer to purify individuals who have become impure because of their contact with death. It's called in Judaism, in Torah, it's called a chok, a statute. And there's a great story told about one of the great rabbis who wrote the Talmud of Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was challenged by the Romans on the red heifer. And basically what they said to him was, this is silly. So this is ridiculous. You take a red cow, where do we see a red cow? And you have to burn it, and you have to take its ashes and mix it in with hyssop and so on. This is a silly part of Judaism. This is what your God wants. Tell us a bit about what that means as a chok.
So first of all, chok indeed is the title for this mitzvah. But you know what? After reading the death of Ivan Illich, I would say that there is another layer to it. It's a chok that we live and die. we have to understand that it's ingrained in our life, the fact that one day we will cease to live our life. And I think that, by the way, the experience of Ivan Illich, with all the suffering and with everything going on, at the end of the book, just before he closed his eyes, he see light. He see like the end of life as the light. What does that mean?
Yes.
It means that the hawk turned to be something that you understand from your own experience. It's hard for us to understand why life has to stop and to cease. And when it happened, we try to deny it, as Ivan Illich tried when he did not suffer from this pain on his side. But indeed, the whole process looked very unusual and very unlogical. And I think the Romans, coming from their side, you know, the builders, the people who saw the world, the physical world, they had the big trouble to see a ritual like this that enabled people to be pure. And that's a process that they have to go in order to go to the temples. Listen, the Romans also had temples, especially in this time. And they went and they never had like to prepare themselves with sprinkling water, going to the mikveh or whatever it is. So for them, it was very, very strange. And let me tell you one more thing. Think about all the laws of Avelut. Like after a person dies, you have like the all kind of minhagim in the Shiva and the Shloishim and the whole month. And you have to tear your clothes, even with no paraduma. There is a set of rituals. And we know that actually these rituals help us to deal better with the new situation. We acknowledge it, we internalize it, and we go on with our life. I met some non-Jewish friends, and they told me how hard it was for them to get used to the fact that a parent passed away, that a friend passed away, because, you know, they were with agony, but they could not go on with their life and to do something to acknowledge it and to go over it. And they told me that from their point of view, the loss of Avelut, lo aleinu, makes so much sense and helps so much to cope with a new situation that I think let's not talk only about paraduma, let's talk about all the rituals that are happening after a time that someone, a beloved one, passed away.
When we say the laws of Avelut, what we're referring to is the laws of mourning. And just to add to what you're saying, I think that if we were just to exist, you and I would just sit here and we would contemplate what happens to us as it happens, including the death of family members that we should not know. Then I think that's where the real suffering comes from. When you take something external to yourself, like a red heifer, right? And you, in your mind, psychologically, you kind of place on it death, but also purification. Because it's external to you, perhaps it is that you suffer just a little bit less. You're dealing with something. We all know that when we're in a difficult time, and tell me if you agree with this, Rabbi, that all of a sudden when we start to organize our home or we start to put things in place, some of that suffering sort of dissipates a little bit. Does this make sense at all?
Absolutely. And I think today in modern psychiatry, it's a well-known principle that when a person is going through trauma, you try to take him to a different zone, that he will do something, she will do something new, because it helps to deal with the suffering and bring back meaning to your life. That's the most important thing, because you know what? We know, for example, that people after the Holocaust, after they were liberated, when they realized that they have no family, they lost their children, their parents, their friends, they lost the taste, the reason for their life. And as Viktor Frankl pointed out, when people were in the camps, they had the hope, they had the meaning, I'm going to reunite with my family. When they realized that this dream shattered, unfortunately, many of them could not take it anymore. They committed suicide. They were completely withdrawn from life. So the ability to do something, especially something that represent water, which is always associated with growth and new life, it will bring you back to your senses and to your ability to go on.
Rabbi, I'm really curious. The parsha, the portion of the week, Chukat, begins with a discussion around Red Heifer, which is a purification that people who have come in contact with a dead body. This is what we're discussing. Yet as you go further in the parsha, two things happen. Two very dramatic things happen. One is the death of Miriam. Miriam is the sister of Moshe Rabbeinu, of Moses. And she really was the one who started off the whole exile by watching her little brother Moses floating down the river and saving him. She was very, very important to the Jewish people. She was the one where the water, she was able to, as a prophetess, get water in the desert for the Bnei Yisrael. And then what happens is perhaps something even bigger. Aaron dies. He dies. He was the high priest. He was Moses' brother who went and challenged Pharaoh a number of different times. Yet the Torah just says, and Miriam died. And the Torah just says, and Aaron died. Why the underplaying of it?
I think for the same reason that we talked before. The Torah tried to send us a message. Every person dies. You have to go on because life are too precious and you cannot stick to your mourning, which is sometimes very, very tempting. Let me tell you a story, a very sad story. I was a soldier in the First Lebanon War. Unfortunately, throughout the war, I lost many of my friends.
Yes,
many.
I know. I'm sorry.
But one of them, the parent never made it. They now, at the time we thought they are old. They were in their 50s. Avrum, until 3 years ago when the father passed away and 5 years ago when the mother passed away, they came every single day to their son's grave and were talking to him and telling to him their life shattered when his life were shattered. As I said, it's a very paralyzing thing, and the Torah does not want to elaborate over it. People dies, we move on. That's the whole purpose of Para Aduma. Don't stick to your pain and your anguish. We have to move on with our life.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot to accomplish. We have a lot to build. We have to leave behind us a better world. We cannot live life of mistake, is the entire message of Ivan Illich, and I recommend everyone to read this book because to me it's like a Musar book. You know what is Musar, Avrum?
What's Musar now?
In the yeshivot, like you learn books that helps you to reflect better on life. You have the Mesilat Yesharim, you have Derech Hashem, all kind of books. I'm telling you, I would recommend every yeshiva guy read The Death of Ivan Illych. It will give every one of us a new perspective about life. So the Torah does not want to elaborate over this concept. Yes, it happened. You have to recognize it. You cannot ignore it. But this has to be a lever to live better life, not something that will withdraw you from life.
By the way, one of the things I was told many years ago when I started complaining about the fact that Torah never mentioned the death of Eve, of Chava. And somebody told me there's no reason to mention it because nothing came out of her death other than her own, obviously, experiences as someone who's dying. But I think here with Miriam and Aaron, perhaps their death was simply a death. And nothing really came out of it which was worth mentioning more about it.
It's interesting that you say that, but our sages say that the parsha of the death of Miriam is adjacent to the parsha of the Red Heifer. And many people, like Rashi, for example, comment that like the Para Aduma, the Red Heifer, is kind of sacrifice. you should know that when a great tzaddik like Miriam passed away, Eve also kind of sacrificed that atoned the sins of the world. I think that there is more than that. I think the same idea of a red heifer enable us to return to life. When great people die, you know what happened? Part of their responsibilities is shifting to us. It's actually an opportunity to grow from the death of other people. You know, until now it was my friend, my parents, the generations before, my in-laws, and you feel how their responsibilities and the opportunities are shifting to you. And I think it's a very important recognition that death for one person is, or might be, or should be, a beginning of growth to the people he left behind.
I love that concept, and I love the idea that the red heifer represents the idea that you just got to move on in life. And I think we see that in the Kaddish as well, the mourner's prayer. It doesn't mention anything about death. And a nice thought that I heard once was that basically what it's saying is, look, when you lose someone, you're going to mourn. You're going to mourn. You're going to have a foot in the grave. It's just the way it is. If you love them. And the Torah knows that. So it doesn't have to remind you every single day when you say Kaddish, remember that person died. They're not here anymore. What it says, in fact, is embrace life. Because when we're mourning, we may forget to do that.
Exactly. And, you know, many times in Baruch Hashem, and my parents should live until 120.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. But when I see on Yom Tov, I see the Azkarat Neshamot, you know, when people coming to Shul to remember their parents. And I always thought, like, this is Sukkot, it's a holiday, it's a Yom Tov. Why do you make people start crying, remembering their parents and so on? And I think the idea is quite the same as you said. It hit me a few years ago. Like, wow, that's amazing. The parents passed away, but their children continue to come to shul, to identify with Jewish values. Isn't it what their parents lived for, like to instill these kind of values in their children? So in a way, the parents continue to live in a different way. They continue to nurture the growth of their children and their family in a different way from a different place. It happened in memories. And that's why maybe there is nothing about Chava death, as you mentioned. I never actually paid attention to it. But once you say it, I think about the idea that maybe Chava never died in terms of she brought life to the world.
That's nice.
Her children were alive. And me and you, in a way, are product of Chava. So she never really died.
It's a nice thought. Nice thought.
Yeah.
Tell me something. How old are you?
I can retire.
No, the reason I ask is because B'li Ayin Hara, you know, we're always concerned about the evil eye. Like, thank God you have both your parents.
It's really amazing. And you know what? Exactly a year ago, me and my wife had the privilege to have our parents alive.
Yeah.
To me, it's because I'm the older one. My wife was the third child, and she had a brother who lost his parents when he's 73. Isn't that amazing?
Amazing. Rabbi, how does Ivan Illich's suffering lead to a profound inner transformation and realization about the nature of life? Can the purification process in PARSHA Chukat be seen as a metaphor for Ivan Illich's ultimate spiritual cleansing and acceptance?
Okay, this is a great question. I would say the following. Reflecting on your life constantly is the secret to live meaningful life. And unfortunately, it happened to Ivan Illich in the last moment of his life. He started to look on his life, and one of the great quotes from the book is, "Did I live my life the wrong way?" Like, he started to doubt his entire life.
Yes.
You know, for us, I have to tell you, the Torah or our sages gave us the opportunity to reflect on our life almost every day. Before a person go to sleep and they say Kriyat Shema, he thinks about like, okay, what happened to me today? Can tomorrow be a better day? Am I succumb like Ivan Illich to societal standards and agreements, or I want to live my own life? And then on Shabbat, you have some time to stop the race of being a judge, of making money, of doing all kinds of work that many, many times, you know what? Think about it. You know, sometimes we work to forget that we are mortal. Like we are busy with something different. So we forget the most important thing in life. One day we are not going to be here. Make this hour, this second important. And we have many opportunities to do it. Shabbat will be a great example. Holiday will be a great example. You take a pause from life and you think about the family you have, you think about the life you have, the community you have and meet in shul, and so on and so on. I find it very, very sad where people in the last moment of their life realized that their life were a mistake. I'm sure it's a terrible experience. And by the way, I want to ask you, now after you read the book, isn't it strange that Tolstoy start the first chapter with actually description of what happened after Ivan Illich died, when they come to the funeral home and the other guy, Pyotr, what was his name, Ivanovich, doesn't know what to do with himself, and he knows that he has to speak to the widow, and he's just waiting for the moment to live on, and the people around him actually start to think about the promotion they are going to get because Ivan Illich is not going to be the judge, right?
They'll
but
step
let me
into
ask
his
you,
position. Yeah.
As the author, shouldn't this chapter will be at the end of the book after he died? Why Tolstoy start with, well, there is no mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah and there is no mukdam u'meuchar in Tolstoy, but why?
Well, what is that? What is that, mukdam and muchar?
Mukdam u'meuchar, there is a rule like in commentary that sometimes the Torah does not put the parsha, the story in the right place for all kinds of reasons. But always when you find something out of order, you have to ask yourself, why the author put it here?
Yes.
And why instead of like, okay, the one chapter before the end is going to be the death of Ivan Illich, that, by the way, described in a magnificent way when he hears that everything is finished and then he dies. And then I would say, tell the story about his friend who came to his funeral. Why Tolstoy doing it the other way around? So here is something very, very important in every literature. The name of the book is deceiving. It's not a story about Ivan Illich. It's a story about his friends, about us, about the people who live around a person who dies, because his death is supposed to change our perspective on life, and that's the story of Para Aduma. Change your perspective of life. Live meaningful life. Meaningful life means connection to God, to values, to Torah, and you have to purify yourself from the terrible experience of death. Can I add one story which I think is amazing?
Go
Do
ahead.
we have enough time, Avrum?
Go ahead, Rabbi. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Let me tell you, when I really understood the story of Para Aduma, and it happened to me a few months ago. And I was in a Shabbaton. Chat is doing like Shabbatons for young students. And I spoke to one madricha, a very lovely girl. She graduated this year.
One of the leaders.
She came from a home which is not from. Her connection to mitzvot, Shabbos, kashrut is very, very little, if at all. And I asked her, Sarit, where are you going next year? And she said to me, I'm going to Israel. I said, whoa, that's amazing, because only about 15% of our students are going to Israel. She's a very smart girl. I would expect her to go to university like most people are doing. And I said, wow, that's amazing. Why did you decide to go to Israel? Listen to the following story. She said, last year, I was in a trip, I think, organized by NCSY to Poland and Israel. She said, when I saw the gas chambers, when I went inside the gas chambers, when I saw the hill of ashes in Auschwitz, I understood that I cannot miss the opportunity to know my Jewish roots better. It will be such a missed opportunity if I will not take a gap year in Israel. First of all, I was like, wow, tears came from my eyes. Such an amazing insight for a girl like 17 years old. That's unbelievable. But when I reflect, when we went on the bus, I said, wow, it's the first time that I understand what is the whole story with the ashes of Para Aduma. Sometimes coming close to such a terrible experience of death can explore new avenues of life. And think about the experience of the Jewish people. This is Sari, this is one girl coming to such an experience. But aren't we a nation like grew from ashes? If it was in Egypt, if it was in Europe, if it was in the Holocaust, we know to take the most horrible, terrible experience of death and somehow to take the death and to make our life much more meaningful.
Excellent. Excellent. Nicely said. Thanks for sharing that story. We're comparing the Parsha of Chukat, the portion in the Torah of Chukat, with the story of the death of Ivan Illich. Some of the broader comparisons that we have talked about and some which we haven't are Ivan Illich's ordinary life, the shock of mortality, existential crisis, isolation and alienation, reflection on life. And when we take a look at the Parsha, some of the subtitles, if you will, within the Parsha deal with purification ritual, purification with impurity, high priest involvement, burning in ashes, symbolism of red. So I want to talk about that for a moment. Red is a very powerful color, and we see it used in many Jewish rituals. As an example, on Passover, we can only have red wine, right? When I read the death of Ivan Illich, there was a number of pages which dealt with his focus on designing his new apartment, right? Making sure that it was something to be seen and that his family would love. So the physical does play an important role here. The heifer has to be red, right? What is the Torah? What is Tolstoy trying to tell us in dealing with such things?
So I think red is the color of life. Think about blood. Think about great empires. They always choose the red color to be their flag. Think about Russia. Think about the Romans. I don't want to say like the party that wanted to conquer the world, the Third Reich. They also used the red one because the red is always, think about Esav. Esav, the physical person, the hunter, is called also Edom, red in Hebrew. This is a very vibrant color, and it sends you a message about life. And I think burning a red heifer is telling you the whole story. Yes, this was like a free a heifer with no yoke on his back, like we would like to live our life, like red, very vivid, very free, with no yoke. But at the end, you burn it. And in a way, there is also it depressing, and many people see like Ivan Illich as a depressing piece of literature, but at the same time, it tells you the reality of life. You cannot deny it, and therefore know what to do with it. So the red will turn into ashes, but at the same time, for the Jewish people, sometimes it's a great hope also, because it means that empires that proud themselves to be like forever and to live forever and they will be able to do to the Jews whatever they want? No, they will turn to ashes. And it's so interesting for me. My love to Italy and Rome. You go and it's archaeological sites, and you have to understand. Sometimes when I go to the forum, I can see the marching of the soldiers coming from victories all over the world and feeling that they are the greatest in the world. I can see in my imagination the palaces, the castles. But today there are archaeological sites. And if you go to Rome, sometimes it's such a depressing experience. And at the same time, I'm going to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was like archaeological site only 100 years ago. And today, like the sprinkling, some water on the Jewish people, they came back to the land. They developed the land. Well, we are not there yet, and as we read in the news, there are many people who get very upset with fulfilling the greatest dream of all generation, a dream that lasted for more than 2,000 years. But still, going to Jerusalem, you see, I think, the para aduma and its effect on the life. Like the red heifer, if it was Rome or Spain or the Nazis, they are in ashes. We grew up, we have the mime, we have the growth that comes sometimes as a result of a terrible trauma.
Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said. Yeah, I heard someone speak on a panel about anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment, and she was pro-Israel, and she turned to one of her colleagues, if you will, who was not so pro-Israel, pro-Jewish. She said, I'm going to tell you one thing. She goes, in not so many years from now, the Jewish people are going to be here still, and we're going to be around. We're going to be creating. We're going to be building. You won't be around.
It's very true. History proved it again and again. We say it in Leila Seder, but we have to remember one more thing. We cannot just rely on the Ribono Shel Olam. We have to do everything in our ability to help the Heberstedt, the Ribono Shel Olam, that we will be around. We need a strong army. We need the Mesirut Nefesh, the sacrifice of our soldiers and the people who are suffering a lot. This is not simple. But yes, I have no doubt that 1,000 years down the road, many of these empires and these anti-Semites, no one will remember them. Our children and grandchildren will be around. I have no doubt about it.
Amen. So 2 questions. One is directed to you, which I asked you before, which I'm not sure you answered. Are you aware of your ultimate demise?
Yeah.
You won't be here one day?
Yes. I don't try to think too much about it because this is depressing in a way, but at the same time, I know it. And honestly, when I wake up in the morning, it's the first or the second or the third thought entertain my mind. And I want this day to be the best day of my life and to do things that will help others and help the world to be better.
So Ivan Illich, he said like this, or Tolstoy wrote, he said that the fact that he was dying, it actually opened up something in him that was illuminating about his life. And we see that in the Torah and even in the Parsha, where on one hand the ashes of the heifer will purify someone, on the other hand it'll make a kohen who came into contact with it impure. So these interesting paradoxes here. But what my question though is, Rabbi, and I wonder what you think based on your life experience, Ilan Ilyich, he woke up, if you will, before he died. But we know that there are people who recognize their ultimate demise, and that in itself slows them down, sometimes even stops them. What's the difference between the two?
That's a great question. Maybe one read the death of Ivan Illych and the other one never did it. Listen, Ivan Illich is the person who denied death until he started to die. We all, again, it's very healthy that we don't think too much about it. The question is, do you have some opportunities to face death, to understand the message of death, the paradox of death, which means on one hand, it shattered the life, it stopped life, but at the same time, it gives meaning to another person's life. And if we think about it, it will change and transform our own life when we know that we will not be here forever. I think the sad reality that most people don't think about it. Most people never thought that their life are going to end. And when it happens, it hits them so strong that they are unable to make this shift in their mind, to reassess their life, and to have, at least in the last moment of their life, the last breath, like this recognition that, okay, it was a mistake, but now I understand what life were about. In one place, Tolstoy said, I cannot remember in what chapter, it's not a matter of days, it's not a matter of hours, it's not a matter of seconds, which means that sometimes there are experiences that you cannot measure them on a scale of time. It's something that happened within you, and it might be even eternal, even if it happened only for 1 second. And I think if we internalize in a healthy way, again, not to be depressed, on the contrary, to understand that we have a job, we have to do something here, a mission, and it's not going to be forever, our life actually will be much better.
And you referred to Viktor Frankl before, Man's Search for Meaning, which is, by the way, one of the most popular books ever written. He was a logotherapy, a psychologist, and he was in Auschwitz. And the thing that kept him going was a love for his wife, who unfortunately did not make it through. And also, he had started a book or books prior to going into Auschwitz,
right,
on psychology and the development of this motif, again, which he called logotherapy. So perhaps the answer to my own question, and again, you spoke to it, I guess if you have meaning in life, you will have meaning in death.
Wow, that's a strong quote. Absolutely.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the end of our shiur, of our class of Parsha and Prose. And I think it went beautifully, Rabbi. You did a beautiful job. Thank you for this.
And I always say, if I did a good job, it's because of you, because you have a way to ask the right questions and to manage the discussion to be not only like thoughtful, but lots of fun. That's why I'm here every week.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Rabbi. I appreciate it a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, we are dedicating this show to the very brave and courageous IDF soldiers, both men and women, to their parents, to their grandparents, and in fact, to all Jews everywhere, because it's not easy to be a Jew today. As my grandparents used to say, schwer zu sein a Yid, it's difficult to be a Jew, sometimes more so than other times. I want to thank Gary Samuel and his wife, Paula Zivot, Peter Eckstein and family, Matthew Diamond and family, for sponsoring the shows and for being part of what we're doing here. Individuals, Jews who live in Toronto with powerful Jewish hearts and powerful Jewish neshamas, souls who care deeply, deeply about our people and are very supportive of our show here. Rabbi, next week we're doing a very cool show. Do you want to tell our viewers about that?
Okay. Next week is going to be the Parsha of Balak and Bilam, two wicked people who try to affect the Jewish people on their way to Israel in a very bad way. And, I always intrigued by sorcery and magics and the black magics and so on. And I thought, I had few books in mind. There is Shakespeare is dealing with it, but then I thought, wait a second, what is the best book that many of our listeners maybe read? If they did not read, their children read, their grandchildren maybe read, and I'm talking about Harry Potter, the first book, with the Philosopher's Stone. And I thought it might be cool actually to discuss the influence of curses and blessings on us. Is it real? Is it just happening to us, we interpret them in a certain way. Okay, I'm not going to say everything that we are going to speak about next week, but yes, it's going to be on Harry Potter and Parshat Balak. I hope you will like it.
And these are books you've read. Did you read the whole Potter series?
I read the whole series. I told you, I think she deserves a Nobel Prize.
You think so?
I do think so. If Bob Dylan got it, she should get 2.
Okay. All right.
And Agnon 10.
Right. I know that you're very loyal to Agnon. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you very much for joining us once again. The series is called Parsha and Prose. I have been your host today, Avrum Rosensweig, together with my very dear friend, the very erudite, Rabbi Shlomo Gemara, I think, once again, who did a magnificent job of marrying these two texts, the Torah text on a particular portion, which is called Chukat, together with the Death of Ivan Illich, written in the 1800s by Leo Tolstoy, perhaps one of the greatest writers ever. So stay with us. If you have any thoughts or any comments, our emails are at the bottom. You're welcome to send us questions, ideas. You can be as critical as you like. You can be as positive as you like, whatever fits. Until then, we both wish you a good Shabbat. Rabbi?
Shabbat Shalom to everyone. I am delighted to see that many people watch it. You can send it over to share it with others. I would love to hear your comments. Your feedback is very, very valuable to both of us. We want it to be a good and fun show, and it will be if we will get your feedback. Thank you.
Nicely done, Rabbi. Nicely done. I want to finish the show with a prayer for the hostages. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless, preserve, and protect the captives and missing soldiers of the citizens of Israel and the Israel Defense Forces. May God rescue them from captivity and speedily restore them in peace. In the merit of the prayers of this holy congregation, who pray for them, all Jews everywhere. May the Holy One, blessed be God, show them mercy, increase their strength, remove their pain, and send them a recovery of body and spirit. May God return them to the bosom of their family swiftly and soon. And let us all say amen.
Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for joining us.